Maverick News. The world is watching. In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Yeah, let's move on to what I think is the bigger story here. And that is the United States and this administration's betrayal of our ally since 1948, the State of Israel. We pledged a long time ago to stand by Israel through thick and thin. Israel has had their 9/11. You know, October 7th was the worst terror attack, and there have been many in Israel over the years, but this is by far the worst that they've ever dealt with. And an aid package has been tied up in Congress now for 5 months? Congress can't seem to get it passed because the administration and the Democrats want to tie aid to Ukraine to the Israel package. And we've also seen a change in tone with President Biden in his State of the Union address. He took about 60 seconds out of that hour-long speech to condemn the October 7th attack, and then he turns right around and spends 5 minutes talking about the tragedy in Gaza, how we must get humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza, and talked about building a port there and started doing airdrops of humanitarian aid. But a lot of American Jews, especially pro-Israel Democrats, are really starting to wonder what the hell? President Biden, Schumer, and then Schumer makes that speech last week calling for regime change, literally, in Israel. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Rabbi.
So, first of all, I have a history. I believe that a rabbi's job is to stand with those who need to be stood with and to call out those things that are not okay. And I've called out repeatedly people like Schiff and Nagler and Wasserman Schultz and Schumer. And I said this a number of months ago. There are some serious anti-Semites in Congress. Omar, Presley, Tlaib, I have more anger and disappointment at Chuck Schumer than I do at all of them combined.
Why is that?
Chuck Schumer is a knowledgeable Jew. What I mean is he is educated. He's not an ignoramus about Jewish values, Jewish theology. Chuck Schumer made his entire career. The word shomer in Hebrew means guardian. And he said, I will always be the guardian of Israel. Chuck Schumer took Obama to task for not having enough Israel support. Chuck Schumer stood by his word. I mean, the fact that I disagree with him on political things is inconsequential. He stood by his word with regard to Israel. And he did. But Chuck Schumer entered the Senate at the same time with a man that became very, very close with him named Congressman Joe Crowley. And they were very, very close friends. They were freshmen together in Congress and the Senate. And in 2018, I guess it was, whenever she was elected, Crowley lost to Ocasio-Cortez, to Ocasio-Cortez. And Schumer took his tail, tucked it between his legs, cut off everything he could below the waist, and was terrified. And suddenly, from being a guardian of Israel, which is the smart thing to do, by the way, Senator Marco Rubio, I once asked him the question, Senator, talking about Israel, and he had this great comment. He goes, forgetting about everything else, we need to support Israel. A, it's the only democracy in the region, and B, everyone knows it's our ally, and if we betray Israel, all of our allies, Japan, whomever, are going to say, when are we going to betray them? And they're going to leave. Brilliant comment. From a geopolitical standpoint, we need to support Israel unconditionally as well. And that's on top of the fact that Hamas wants to destroy Western civilization and all that. Schumer turned his back. And there's a special place for people who know better. Ocasio-Cortez doesn't. What does she know? What does she understand?
Very little. Very little.
What does she know about Judaism? What does she know about Israel? What does she know? Schumer knows.
Which makes the betrayal even worse, doesn't it? Because he knows better.
It's horrible. Because he really does know better. And when you have to say that Donald Trump is a more observant in terms of his actions, is a more observant Jew than Chuck Schumer, there's a problem going on with us. What is not being reported on as clearly is what Biden has done is put the brakes on arms that Congress has already attributed to Israel, and put the brakes on so that they're not getting there. That's probably one of the reasons that Israel is a little bit slower to get into Rafah. The idea that, if Israel really didn't care about hurting civilians, Gaza would have been a glass playground by October 10th. No other country in the history of the world, if they are holding their enemy, which has attacked them in siege, no other country says, "Oh, by the way, let us send you some food and drink." The whole idea of a siege is to stop it. The war should be ugly because that's reason to not go to war. They want to cease fire. They're still sitting on over 100 hostages for 5 months. You think these young women who are there, who are younger women, who've been getting raped over and over every day? I'm not a biologist. I'm pretty sure those young women are pregnant.
Yeah. Some of them are Americans. They're still holding Americans as well.
But Biden is concerned about losing Dearborn, Michigan, and losing these battleground states. And so he is doing that, and he is convinced that the Jewish vote will not leave him. And he may or may not be right. I don't know. I was never a supporter of his. So, I called for the idea 6 years ago that we should en masse try and get out of the Democratic Party unless it changes. And by the way, just so you guys know, I have my liberal credentials. I worked on Jerry Brown's presidency.
Did you?
So I did. And I went to UC Berkeley. So
good old Jerry Brown.
So it's not that I have this hate for the Democratic Party, God forbid. Where it has gone over the last number of years.
Right. It's not the Democratic Party that you and I grew up in.
No.
I'm an old school Democrat.
Yeah, and so the fact that Schumer has just betrayed it, as has Blinken, they keep coming in there. How dare Schumer? I don't know if you saw his speech the day after he was on the Congress floor. Did you guys see that?
Yes.
So he actually said he wanted to go further and decided not to. That he actually wanted to not only call for elections, but call for Bibi's resignation. I'm sorry, and let me preface this. I have never been a traditional fan of Mitch McConnell for a variety of reasons. McConnell's response to Schumer was totally 100% accurate and beautiful. Never in the history of the country have we had a congressman a senator get up on the Senate floor and say, we want to interfere in a foreign nation's elections. I'm not saying they didn't do it. I'm not saying it hasn't been done. But to actually make that announcement?
They usually don't say that part out loud.
And that says hubris and arrogance and this idea of pushing a two-state solution on people who understand the Hamas. Have either of you guys ever read the Charter of 1988? Do you know what that is?
I have. Yes, I have.
Okay. Rick, are you familiar with that at all?
No, I'm not.
It's the Charter of Hamas, where they say that they are the wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. In Articles 7, 11, and 13, they're very, very clear. They want the obliteration of all Jews.
Facts.
Period. That the day of judgment will not come until all Jews are killed. Those few left stand behind rocks and trees, and the tree cries out, O Muslim, or Abdullah, O Muslim, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill me. They are not interested in land. They're interested in death.
And if I
God,
may, I hate to interrupt, but you know the Hamas fan club, the defenders of Hamas, they will say that, oh, Hamas didn't really mean that. See, they updated their charter, they revised it in 2017, and they took out the "we're going to kill all the Jews" part. Would you like to respond to that?
yeah, if you look at their charter and if you look at the Muslim Brotherhood, they're very clear about the fact that
Yep.
any tools are available in order to kill the infidel. And by the way, that's not just me, that's every Christian and Catholic. And not only
And
that,
do you think that they revised their charter,
Right,
Rabbi?
it's
Do you
also
think that
every
they?
Muslim.
I'm sorry, we're talking over each other. Do you think that they revised their charter and took that out to satisfy their Western audience?
I don't think that it's clear because remember, as I was just going to say, it's not just Jew, Christian, and Catholic that they need to destroy. It's every other Muslim who's not a fanatic like theirs, like they are. And so they took that out to adapt it. But they say still clearly that they're part of the Muslim Brotherhood, that they're part of what 1922, with the idea of reestablishing a caliphate theocracy worldwide. And they say the only reason to sit down with peace is to sit down at the peace table is to be able to use it as subterfuge. This is all part of who they are, their theology, and what they're doing. And they've had lots of chance. Look, Israel always will make a deal of land for peace. We want peace, but not when Israel, effectively in 2005, for all intents and purposes, Gaza was its own place.
Mm-hmm.
They chose to put Hamas in. I don't want to hear about innocence. They elected Hamas from 2007 on. And there's still the latest polls that are from Gaza that over 80% of Gazans approve of what happened on October 7th. And you can't make peace when someone wants you dead, if that's their goal. There's no place to have a dialogue when the goal is to do what they've done. People are acting like, well, what's the big deal? They took hostages, but, that's all in retaliation. This is the expression of pure evil, what they did on October 7th and subsequent. And, again, despite what some people may think, Bibi doesn't call me up for my opinion. Hamas needs to be utterly destroyed like Amalek. And on this holiday of Purim, like Haman, we need to understand there is evil in the world. And evil needs to be destroyed. There are places you cannot negotiate with. I still believe you can negotiate with Hezbollah. Okay? And on October 6th, despite all they had said, I would have said, if we can make a deal with Hamas, do it. Not now.
That seems to be out of the question for both sides. That's why the two-state solution just seems completely unworkable to me. It seems like a fantasy that's held by Western politicians. But at this point, the people of Israel have completely turned against that idea since October the 7th for all the reasons that you just cited. And Hamas and the people of Gaza say, no, we're not interested. So we cannot force this on them any more than we could force Israel to have an unscheduled election. This is really not the business of the United States.
So Biden and Schumer clearly think they can. And Laura, this is what, based on what you said opening, this may be the most important part of a conversation. I want to just toss that for you to think about and toss that with other people. So a two-state solution is an impossibility. Even before Hamas, a two-state solution is an impossibility. Let me explain why. You cannot have a nation of Palestine that is on this river and the sea, the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, because it's saying that you have a nation that is non-contiguous. And over time, whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade, or a century, people will say, wait, everything in between is actually ours. If New York and California seceded from the United States and somehow managed to make their own country of New California, okay, it would only be a matter of time before people in both states said, wait a minute, all the people in Idaho and Michigan and everywhere else in the country are in our occupied territory. How do we know? Because we've got the two borders. Anyone who ever played the child's game of Risk knows you got to get the borders or what defines it. Okay. A two-state solution is an impossibility. It doesn't work, not with that definition.
Over to you, Rick. I know we've only got a few minutes left. I wanted Rick to get a question in before you go.
Well, Lord, this is worth. I will stay longer for this purpose.
Oh, thank you.
Okay,
thank you. We appreciate the extra time.
This is a really important piece that I think needs to get out there in every way it can. I have started working with other people on a different concept that there's a precedent that I believe, as slim a chance as there is, holds a potential issue, which is not a two-state solution, but a three-state solution. Okay. You separate, which the Palestinians would never go for, but you separate out the West Bank, you separate out Gaza and Israel. And you make peace with Gaza, not with Palestine. There's precedent for this in athletics because in 1964, the Gazans had their own Gazan Amateur Athletic Federation. And it took 19 years for Arafat to convince them to come into the Palestinian Athletic Federation. But if you create a peace with Gaza, first of all, you got to get rid of Hamas. You got to get hostages back. You totally destroy Hamas. But at that point, Gaza, for all intents and purposes, should be singable. It's a beautiful beach country. International investment. You give a piece of, just like Indian reservations do, a piece of the resorts and everything goes to Gazan citizens, and you make peace with Gaza, not with a Palestine. I think that is the only way, possibility of possibly doing something. I've had conversations with different people in politics, different worlds. I'm not alone in this thought, but it's something that maybe should be more entered into the conversation and dialogue. That in fact, we should not be having a dialogue of two states, but a dialogue of three, and separate Gaza out. And then so, again, can't do anything until Hamas is destroyed, hostages are back, God willing. But to separate and have a peace with Gaza and to help that survive and for Gaza to be a productive and peaceful neighbor of Israel. I think it's, when you said about the two-state solution, you're right, it can never work. It's a long shot, but maybe this is one that can.
Very interesting. Over to you, Rick. Your turn.
Even in the chat right now, I see people referring to the children being killed in Gaza. And I don't know if it's even fair of me to try to ask you a question about this, because you don't tell the military, the Israeli military, what to do. You don't control the policies or the decisions of Benjamin Netanyahu or any member of the government there. But this kind of rhetoric is everywhere, and it's blending in with this rise in, I would say, prejudice and bigotry. How do you respond to it? How do we deal with this?
I think, honestly, I've used this. You can find tape on me from October 7th, 15th on different podcasts where I was asked to. It's a wonderful young group of people, Tara and Ellie, with, I think it's either, I always forget if it's 180 shift or shift 180. From that moment, when it first happened, what's wrong? And people were saying, we got to just go carpet bomb Gaza. I base my decisions and my choices on text, on our Bible, on our Talmud, things like that. And there's a great teaching, that we all know the story. Pharaoh's soldiers go into the Sea of Reeds and they drown. And that's justifiable, right? I mean, they're pursuing Israel, they're pursuing the Hebrews, going for freedom. No one ever argues about that. They wanted to kill them. No one argues about that. But the angels start to rejoice, the Midrash says, and God stops them rejoicing and says, the work of my hands is being destroyed, and you want to sing songs of praise. There is no joy in this, and there shouldn't be. God forbid there ever is. It is a horrible tragedy of any life. And that doesn't just mean children. It means adults. That means Hamas soldiers. I have said Kaddish, the prayer for the dead, for Hamas soldiers. And I've said it, not for them, but for me, so I keep my humanity. What they are doing is horrific. If I believed in demons, it's demonic. But there is a difference between a moral war that was not, you did not start, and waging that as opposed to what happened on October 7th. There is a qualitative difference. And anyone who just makes a moral equivalency doesn't understand the depths of real evil. Does that help a little bit, Rick?
A little bit. What's your view on them using children in this manner as human shields? Children being used as shields. Is there an element of martyrdom that's coming into play there?
I think it's an element of understanding the Jewish soul, how much pain that gives us. I constantly am quoting Golda Meir. I constantly quote Golda Meir. And I didn't used to, okay? But her comment that we may someday be able to forgive you for killing our Israeli children, but we'll never be able to forgive you for making us kill your children. My friend I was just speaking about, who has nightmares and can't sleep because he sees the face of the child that he had to kill, because otherwise all of his compadres would be killed. There's
what a choice to have to make.
Oh, that's a special kind of evil that uses civilians as shields. That's a special dark place of evil. So people have grown in the last few decades to say there is no evil, there's an equivalency between all things and everything's okay. And that's just not true. I once read a great book about John Lennon's song Imagine. There's no borders, well, if there's no distinction, then there's no value either. There's a beauty of a rainbow that is not there in a single color. I don't side with the idea the only good Arab is a dead Arab. God forbid. And it is, I once heard this from a native elder, actually, that all the spiritual paths are different colors. Judaism is blue, and Christianity is green, and Catholicism, and Hinduism, all these different paths, Islam. And that together they make a tapestry and a rainbow, and that's really what we need in the world. So to do what they do, we need to understand that that is evil, call it out, and destroy it for what it is. There is not one Israeli soldier who has killed a human shield child. It is the Hamas who's responsible for that. It is the Israeli who holds the pain personally.
By a lot of attention focused on the United States, the support for Israel comes from the United States mainly. Like that's your main ally. But what about
American? What do you mean your main ally?
But what about other countries and the countries that are aligned against Israel? What role, for instance, do you see Iran and this relationship between Iran, Syria, Russia, especially Russia? What's your view on Russia's role in this?
Well, let's back up. Again, let's be clear. Bibi and I have never had a conversation. If he's watching this, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Kol HaKavod, and I would love to tell you that in person, okay? Just be clear on this, all right? Despite what some people think there's some Jewish whatever. If Hamas was not a problem to most of the modern Arab world, they would let them in, wouldn't they? They would say, well, come on.
Right, those borders would be open. Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, they'd be like, come on in, we'll protect you, but they're not.
They're not. Why are they not? Because these are fundamentalists who want those kind of Muslims killed just as much as they want us Jews. Maybe not quite as much, but right afterwards, okay? So they don't want them either. And I think that my sense is that much of the Arab world has been hoping that we're just going to let Israel do the dirty work for us and get rid of these bad guys.
That's how it seems to me, Rabbi.
That's what it seems like. You know, no one wants Iran. Iran's really a problem. Well, you know what? Let's let them get to a place where they become dangerous to Israel, so Israel takes them. And then the world can hate Israel for doing what they do.
There you
go. Again,
I
think it was Golda who said, you know, if the choice is being pitied and dead or being hated and alive will choose alive and hated every time. And we need to finish the mission. We need to get into Rafah. We just clean it out. That serves American goals. That serves the West's goals. It serves Western culture because people need to understand this is not a fight. Israel's the front line. This is not a fight against Israel. This is a fight against all of Western culture. Michael Savage talks about that very officially. Dr. Savage is a genius in a lot of ways, and he talks about that. And we need to do this not just for Israel, but for the world. Biden seems more concerned if he can get enough votes in Dearborn, Michigan, to get Michigan Electoral College somehow, and for him and to win his election, or the people behind him feel that, whatever it may be. That's not where we should be. This is literally a battle for the survival of Western culture against a theocratic caliphate. So,
on the issue of going into Rafah, it seems to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Israel probably should have gone in there a month ago. But because of all this international pressure for them to pull back, to evacuate the civilians, they've given them plenty of time. They've had more than a month to get the civilians out of there, as Israel always does. You make the argument that the IDF is the most moral army in the world because no other army, including the United States, would give civilians a month to get out before we start the airstrikes, before we go in. So it seems to me that Israel has lost the advantage here because they've given Hamas plenty of time to skedaddle and get out of there. Am I wrong?
So it's interesting. I think you're probably partially right, partially not. I mean, we're not. One of the things that I actually have faith and trust in is that the guys in Israel know what they're doing better than I do. Okay, they got a bigger plan and a better plan for the most part. And there is a whole attitude. Recently, they just got a whole bunch of Hamas terrorists in a hospital because they had figured they could sneak back and skedaddle back up to the hospital from Rafah. Well, instead, they got back and all of a sudden they were found by IDF and didn't do so well for them. I think there's an important piece that people don't understand about Israel's need for America. Israel does not need America to win a war.
True.
Okay? Just be clear about that. Israel
they
does
won
not
wars before we started giving them help in the 1960s. They didn't need our help.
And they have, if they wanted to finish the war, they could have finished the war by October 10th.
Mm-hmm.
They would just have killed a lot of civilians. And a lot of it, they were just like everybody else does. Like the Allies did in World War II, like we did in Afghanistan and Iraq. They could have done war like every other nation in the history of the world. They choose to be more ethical, and so they did.
I agree.
But here's where Israel does need America. When Israel goes to war, everybody goes to war. Okay? And the longer a war is, the more problematic it is for Israel because of winning the peace. The industry shuts down. There's now a big push that's going on. And if any of your audience wants to know more, they can email you, email me. There's a big push for people who are executives, who are Jewish executives, because they want to at least have some sort of filter in accounting or technology or things like that, that they'll bring them to Israel for a few weeks or a month. There's a lot of programs like this so they can fill in for guys who are reservists, because industry shuts down. Can't produce certain things. You can't fulfill the worldwide orders. We need America so that industry doesn't shut down. The other thing is, one of the largest industries in Israel is tourism.
Right.
And the longer this goes on, look, this is a time of year right now, is we're in Lent. This is Easter, and in a couple of weeks is Pesach, it's Passover. You can't get a hotel room in Israel, because all the Catholics, all the Christians, all the Jews are all going to Israel for Passover, for Easter. Getting a hotel room right now in Israel is not so tough. So does that help a little bit why we need America? Oh,
I just lost your audio again.
Back.
Can you hear me?
You're back.
You got soft again.
I don't know. It's kind of cutting in and out.
I can't hear you at all.
That's better.
I cannot hear you at all.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. I cannot hear you.
I'm going to try and do sign language. Can you
There
hear
you
me
are.
now?
I
You got us
can.
now?
I can hear you great.
Great. I
Oh,
can
there
hear
you
you
went.
too.
Now you disappeared again.
So we were talking about the tourist season, of course, Easter, Passover. These are such important times that, the faithful from all over the world travel to Israel. A friend of mine is actually a tour guide over there, and this is typically his very busy season. But since October 7th, business is just, you know, dead, if you'll pardon the expression. And
I'll bet he had no business for the Christmas season, did he?
no, which is
Okay, so
sad.
so think about that for a minute, right? One tour guy, you know him. His business has been decimated for all different reasons. That has effects on all of the other businesses of retail, services, all this. War. This is, and that's my big issue with what Israel done. Is my personal issue is I think this is dangerous to keep going this long.
Yes, I
And
agree.
that's again, Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't, you know, I don't get the phone call. So,
I wanted to ask you about this too. The the anti-Israel crowd, if they will condemn October 7th, and some of them will, they say, but that's no excuse for killing 30,000 civilians in Gaza. And those numbers, of course, come from the Gaza Health Ministry, which is Hamas. And I don't know who to believe on those numbers. I hear varying reports. But what a lot of people don't understand, and I was hoping you could explain, is how many attacks Israel has suffered since October 7th. They're still getting rocket attacks. They're still getting terror attacks. A guy with a car and run people down. Guy with a knife, just goes on a stabbing spree. This is common in Israel. And could you speak to that a little bit?
just a little bit, yeah. I mean, look, let's not talk about for a moment 30,000 died, or 12,000 died, or 120,000 died, because one death is one too many. Okay?
Amen.
And if you want to talk proportionality, given that there are, the number of Israelis, and depending on which one you want, which numbers you want, how you want to define Arabs or Muslims, based on what they did in October 7th, if you really want to try and play proportionality and equanimity, and I guess this would be DEI for lives, God forbid, then if you wanted to play that game, Israel should go kill 2.5 million for the same percentage of Jews that were killed. That is disgusting and ludicrous and sick. God forbid we ever think like that. So you can't play that game. The simple reality is Hamas has done evil. They continue to. Rockets are launched constantly in Israel every day. Sirens go off pretty much every day. And thank God for the Iron Dome. Thank God for God. And you got to realize that there's no proportionality. One death on any side is one death too many. And the difference is intention. That's what changes the moral equivalency. Their intention is to torture, to hurt, to kill. Israel's intention is to survive. That is a very different intention.
So, what does winning look like?
That is a better theological question than I think you realized. In Judaism, the goal of war is not victory. The goal of war is peace. We have a whole Torah portion that says when you go to war, not if you go, when you go to war, here's how you act, here's how you don't act. Victory, as you put it, when does it end? Is when there's a long and permanent lasting peace with Israel and its neighbors. So what do we know? We know that's not going to happen as long as there is any Hamas around. We know that's not going to happen as long as there is any pseudo-organization saying that they control Gaza when in fact it's Hamas. Again, remember, Gaza had its own control in 2005. By 2007, Hamas is in power. And that's, I think, the first piece. I believe in miracles, and so I choose to believe the hostages can come home. I also recognize that miracles are called miracles for a reason. And it's highly doubtful how many of those are alive or okay. Either way, they've been used in so many different ways as bargaining chips, which is why they were kidnapped in the first place. But Hamas must be utterly destroyed. Every terror tunnel destroyed. Every gateway to every terror tunnel destroyed. Every lair, every battalion base destroyed. There's still at least 4 battalion bases in Rafah, which is why we need to go in. But what is victory? What is an end? Is where Gaza is in a place where they are saying, we want, the people living in Gaza, we want to be in a peaceful relationship with the people of Israel as Israelis, not as occupiers of Palestine. That's a whole other conversation. Now, there is no such thing as a historical Palestine, and there isn't. There are plenty of articles on that and justified it, but that kind of peace, of real peace, is the victory. What for many years we've had since the Land for Peace deal with Egypt. So we need to think that that's the end game.
When you say destroy Hamas, isn't that really more destroying an ideology, destroying bigotry in a larger sense? I mean, how do you destroy that?
I didn't
just look at what's on the screen right now.
Forgive me, I can't see. So
it says a rabbi who knows exactly zero about Islam is the only special thing here. As I
Rick, I want to just interrupt. I want to interject something. Who wrote that? I spent 3 years of my life reading Rumi every day. Okay, to say that is again outrageous propaganda, because he probably has it. I have been with the whirling dervishes and have been with Islamic scholars and with some of the beauty of what is Islam. But at the same time, let's make no bones about it. People say, oh, let's have peace in Ramadan. You know what? That is BS. Muhammad himself started 2 wars during the month of Ramadan. There are 4 months in the Islamic calendar where you are prohibited from initiating war. 4 of them. Ramadan is not one of them. Ramadan has a history of war. So when some ignoramus makes a comment like that, that shows exactly how little they actually do know about Islam. So I'm sorry to get passionate about that, but that's the kind of hatred that they choose to use.
Which is exactly the point that I'm trying to make. How do you, I mean, even if you eliminated every last leader, member of Hamas, these ideas are still out there. How do you, right? So
my belief, this is my belief, that does not mean it's accurate or correct. Okay. When I told you about that idea of a 3-state solution, is that if you eliminate the physicality of all the ones that we know hate of Hamas, and then you give another opportunity, I believe in the goodness of all souls. So I believe that that most people would rather accept the fanatics, which is what Hamas is, that most people would prefer peace and prosperity over war. And that if you could make resorts, if you could get international investment, if you did have a Gaza administered by an international community of which Israel would be part of, that over time, as the Gazans are seeing, wait a minute, this is a better way of life. My child is doing better than when I was trying to raise him to kill the Jew. But that is a way that you could do it. But it's a slim chance. The other obvious way is that, we just have prayer and faith that Messiah is going to come or Jesus will return, whichever you view it. I've always said that the Messiah is going to come. I'm going to say welcome. And my friend Rob, who is a Christian, is going to say, this is Jesus come back, welcome back. And we're all going to sign. We're all going to welcome. that's the other answer, is you just put it in the hands like that. I'm not, I believe in an Islamic saying of trust in Allah, but trust in God, but tether your camel at the same time. So I actually want to do the work for it. So does that, it is a hard definition, difficult thing to do. It says something that even the Arab countries don't want these people in their countries.
When I'm looking at the politics here and these other countries, a lot of people are saying support for Hamas comes from Iran. Russia supports Iran. The other day, I was on another program, and there was discussion about how maybe Russia could act as a peace broker here, but at the same time, we're seeing Hamas actually go to Moscow. I think that's the other side of the equation. We're talking a lot about the United States, not so much about Russia, which I think has been sort of quiet on this issue, honestly. But they're certainly involved and have an interest in this as well. Do you have any comments on that and specifically the roles of those countries?
I can only tell you Russia was one of the 5 original nations that accepted or recognized Israel in 47, 48. I have no comment on Russia per se, except that I think Senator Rubio was right, which is when we turn our back on Israel, the world's going to turn on the United States. Turns us back on Israel, the world's going to turn us back on the United States. Mm-hmm. That's simple. It's my belief. I know you're popping something up in the chat room, but I cannot see it.
It's not me. I think it's Lori in the background, just putting stuff up randomly. This says educate the population.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It says educate the population why only one Israel will work annex Gaza, Judea, Samaria.
That is a biblical concept. And I just want to be conscious of time, because we are really close to 7:30 my time, and I know we're going to end at 7, but I just think all this is so important, right? Mm-hmm. As we talk about Israel. There is the concept that the only Israel that really should exist, that this is very much a Christian concept as well. I mean, it's actually more Christian in some ways than it is even for most Jews, that Israel should be the definition of the land of Israel should be defined as the biblical land as defined in Torah, which would include Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, as well as some other areas as well. And that's the promised land, and that's what it should be. I am right now, my focus, I think this is an important piece. Israel does a lot of things really well. They are horrific when it comes to publicity and press. I mean, they just are horrible, and they always have been. And we have sort of bought into this language. Everyone's talking about two-state solution. What happens with Gaza? What happens the day after? You know what, Rick? If you and I, did you ever play a sport? Were you ever on an athletic team? What sport did you play?
Hockey.
Okay, I did not play hockey. I'm a Jew from California. That takes me out of the hockey range. Okay, on every level. Okay, but okay, if I'm on your hockey team and it's the league finals or the championship, and we've just started 5 minutes into the game, one of the stupidest things we could do is be planning our victory party, right? Got to win the game. I'm not interested in talking right now about the day after until we win the game, until the mission's accomplished. And I think that what they have successfully done is keep talking about, well, what are we going to do after? There's going to be a two-state solution. You know what? Let's destroy Hamas first. Let's get hostages back, and then we can have a dialogue. But right now, we are in the middle of that hockey game, to use the analogy, and we don't know when it's going to end. We're not going to sure how many overtimes there will be. And people are planning they're fighting about which restaurant for the victory party. So we need to get in there and win the war, get this over with already.
Agreed.
And then we can have the dialogues and the fights and the discussions about are we going to this pizza joint or that pizza joint for the victory party for the hockey game? We can have the dialogues, discussions. Are we going to this two-state, three-state? What are we going to go do? This is all moot until it's over. And every day that goes long is harder on Israel. And it's just, so I'd rather, let's worry less about the day after. Let's get this, let's America support, why is Biden and Schumer and everything else, they're talking about, this is not a peaceful regime. You know what? Why don't you just help us win the war, and then you can worry about whether or not things go well.
100%. And that's what we ought to be doing. But, I wanted to interject just a thought.
Okay, just very quickly, I am just
quickly, because I know you have to go. You have a ticket to go see the $1 Million Quartet show tonight, and I don't want you to miss that because it's a great show.
And we've got Purim at the same time. So
yes,
together and everything else. Yes.
Well, I was just going to say that most of the critics of Israel, the people who talk stuff online about Israel, have never been there. They don't know the first thing about Israeli society. And I'll tell you this, I have not visited there, but I have many friends who live there, and I pay attention to what goes on there. And nobody is more critical of the Israeli government than Israelis.
Lord Sachs has a couple of great lines, and then I want to share with you a experience. Lord Sachs has the line, hating somebody who's different is not anti-Semitism, it's xenophobia. Hating what the Israeli government does is not anti-Semitism.
That's right.
Israel is a democracy and is run as such. And it should be run as such, and it has been run as such. And in many ways, a much more honest democracy than we have currently in this country.
Exactly.
Okay, so, Israel is alive. Israel is this place that is different. It's interesting to me to say that most of these anti-Israel people have never been in Israel. I didn't realize that. Israel, and I've actually been talking with people that we should lead an interfaith trip sometime in the next year, because I was talking to a friend who's a pastor that Christian trips don't go to any of the great Jewish sites, and Jewish sites don't go to any of the Christian sites, and that's really a shame. It's a shame that people go on a Christian tour to Israel and they don't know what Mount Masada is, and it's a shame that Jews go to Israel and they don't know what the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is. So, every Jew goes, he's got to climb Masada. But Christians don't necessarily know what it is. So to do an interfaith trip, Israel is a land of peace. It is truly a land of integration. The irony of seeing a sign that says queer Jews for Palestine. And
try that in Gaza.
Well,
just try that in Gaza. Let's see how far that.
I saw that image and that picture, and I thought to myself, do you not understand that you are a fundraising auction item for Palestinians to see who will bid the most to behead you the first time, the second time, and the third time for all these different. And that's accepted in Israel. So it is a very, very special acceptance, much better than, by the way, in this country as well, in terms of accepting different things.
Rabbi, look at the case that's before the Supreme Court right now. Murthy versus Missouri, which was Missouri versus Biden, and Kennedy versus Biden, all about censorship on social media by the White House, by the government, telling us what we can and cannot debate, which topics are off limits. And we know all about that here at Maverick News because we have also been censored by the Biden administration in this White House. But in Israel, I have never seen the government taking down critique of the government.
It's a whole different world. I will tell you something. We were there in July, this past July, which on the one hand is the most amazing time to be in Israel. The days are long and it's so beautiful. And on the other hand, it really puts a whole different definition on what hot is. Okay, but
It's the desert.
it's the desert. Yes,
Yeah.
it is the desert people. While we were there, remember this is pre-October 7th. There are all these demonstrations being had against Netanyahu that were going on with regards to the court system. I don't have to get into the politics of it. We don't need to go what the discussions are or what the arguments are on either side, because for the points of this illustration, it's not important, and I am conscious of time, and I'm grateful. I don't know how many you guys, but I went to school at UC Berkeley. I've been around demonstrations my whole life. Organic demonstrations are organic demonstrations. They are controlled chaos, right? You know, that's, and I will tell you, and I have video, that the demonstrations in Israel, which were allowed, totally allowed, they weren't stopped, were not organic demonstrations. It was BLM 2.0. No organic demonstration starts exactly at 10 p.m., ends exactly at 10:30 p.m., and has a $6,000 portable sound system. No demonstrations that are organic have hundreds or thousands of stops for water, food, fruits, umbrellas, flags. That's not an organic demonstration. That's some people trying to establish a coup.
Right. Color revolution.
And
And do you think that that's also what's happening in the Western countries, these free Palestine protests that we see all over the place every Saturday?
Absolutely. And I in Tel Aviv, there were a number of huge billboards, huge billboards, and buildings that have been blocked out with like painting, you know, like Mylar paint, bright yellow, big black fist, and it says underneath in Hebrew what translates to resist. Does that sound like an organic demonstration to you, or does that sound like something else?
Yeah.
And maybe that's a thought to leave us with, other than to try and have peace. But Israel is all about peace. Our goal, again, Rick, is as Jews, the goal of war is peace, not victory. And you're not going to get peace with people who want you dead, and you're not going to get peace with people like the nincompoop that wrote that comment, Rick. With, you know, it's to make assumptions.
And Rabbi, I just want to say in closing that I believe you cannot have peace until after victory. When we look at the example of World War II, for example, Nazi Germany, we had to win that war first before there could be denazification and eventually peace. And here we are, all these years later, have a very good relationship with Germany. Germany's one of the great democracies of Europe today. So I hope that's possible.
You're 100% right. 100%. You must destroy evil before you can have peace with what's left.
Absolutely.
I have one final question.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you can help me understand. You mentioned this potentially as color revolution on display weekend after weekend. Do you have any idea who is behind that?
That's the question.
Didn't you know, Rick? It's somehow it's all the Jews' fault. So, right.
You're doing this to yourselves, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I could make the same guesses that the two of you would make. I would make the exact same guesses that the two of you would make. I'm sure that the three of us could look and say, okay, these are the obvious players. This is probably who it's coming from. This is, but I have no greater insight than you do. I do have footage of it. I can tell you that it shut down tourism. I can tell you that it is, this was that it shut down industry and everything else. But I can also tell you this was not organic. I can tell you that it just doesn't. Organic things don't happen that perfectly organized in that kind of square. It just doesn't.
When I follow the money, it all seems to lead me to Qatar and Iran. Just saying.
People keep wanting to blame about Hamas. Their leaders are living in Qatar with billions of dollars. So you're so worried about humanitarian aid and feeding them. And you know what? Why don't they do it? Why
It's
don't
their
they get
job.
involved?
They're the elected government. They are responsible for the safety of their people.
You'd think.
You would think.
You would think, but that involves ethics. So.
Well, Rabbi, I appreciate the extra time that you gave us tonight. Thank you so much. I know you have to go. Usually this is the part of the show where I say, tell people where they can find you and follow you and contact you. But after the hate mail you got this week, I'm not sure if I want to give out your contact info.
Here's the reality, that you can reach me easily on X Twitter, Rabbi_Barclay. That you can go to, as opposed to doing anything through our temple, you can go to info@RabbiMichaelBarclay.com to reach me for things. And hopefully we can talk more in other times about more pleasant things.
I hope so.
I'm. Here's the difference, guys. Well, here's the simple way to do it. Okay, I'll make a phrase way, because I think I said this to you, Laura. I had a video that had 5 million views I didn't even know about. Right? Tells you exactly how into all this stuff I am. I have 3,000 or 4,000 people who follow it. So this is not my world. If someone wants to contact me and they want to reach out and they want to have talks or articles or speaking engagement, they can just do info at RabbiMichaelBarclay.com. I'm certainly allowed to, they haven't thrown me off of Twitter.
Yet?
Well, I don't understand this whole ratio thing. People say I'm here for the ratio. I haven't quite understood that, but someone was trying to explain it to me. But
it means they're there with their popcorn to watch people insult you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't quite get it, but,
that's what it means.
To me, it is about social media has power to help people and for people to learn. Hopefully that person who made the incredibly hate-filled and ignorant comment earlier, Rick, took a look inside himself and said, oh, wait a minute, maybe this quote-unquote rabbi not only knows about Islam, but knows more about it than I do.
I hope so. I hope folks can be reached, if their minds and hearts can be opened to what I believe is the truth, what you believe is the truth. And Rabbi, I wish you well. I am terribly sorry about everything that you're going through. I wish you and your congregation and your family safety and happiness, and enjoy the show tonight. I wish I could go see the $1 Million Quartet. It's one of my favorites.
It'd be too late. I may have to only go straight to Purim, as opposed to going to go first. But oh man, and thank you for that, and thank you for having me on. And hopefully we can do this again sometime in the future with more time, more happy news.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm very glad I was able to meet you.
And me too. And thank you for everything you're doing with the truckers. Laura was explaining to me some of that, and no, I mean, God bless, man. I that's forgiving the pun. That's where the rubber hits the road, and it's where the Judaism is about faith and action, and we need to step up and say what's right and what's wrong, what's about freedom and what's not. And look, you started it all by just, I happen to be at a rally speaking. They asked me to speak, and you know exactly where I stand on those kind of things. So thank you guys so much for doing that, because I think
that's why I thought you'd be a great guest for Maverick News, because that's how we started, was during the Freedom Convoy, broadcasting that live, and so we're still all about freedom and peace. So thank you so much, Rabbi. We will see you again soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, sir. Good night. So, Rick, wow. Unfortunately, he couldn't stay for the whole 2 hours. Yeah. But I have a clip, since he had to go, I have a clip of Rabbi Barclay talking here about why Hamas is evil and must be destroyed. Let's take a look.
A lot of our sages for 2,000 years, Maimonides being one, the Rabbi being one, a number of sages said there is no words of anger or hate in the Bible. Mm-hmm. Only love and forgiveness. And if you find hate or anger in the Bible, it's you. It's not the Bible. It's not the Torah. Yeah. So as an example, when you read a translation, and every translation by definition is an interpretation, and you read that God is angry or God's wrath, That's not what the Hebrew says. What the Hebrew actually says is that God's nostrils flare. Now, your nostrils flare when you're angry, but they're flaring because you're passionate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because it's important to you. So you look through, and again, I don't speak about the Christian scriptures because that's not my field of expertise.
Right.
Okay? And I don't know Greek, so I leave that to Rob. There's no hate in our scriptures, but there's this really disturbing line that's repeated over and over. It's repeated a few times about a guy named Amalek who battles the Hebrews. And it says that you shall always be at war with Amalek from generation to generation. You shall blot the remembrance of him off of the face of the earth. Now, this is so important that King Saul, generations later, loses his kingship when he doesn't destroy all the Amalekites.
Right.
Okay. So the question becomes, wait a minute, why does God say this? And why does it say that you'll be at war with Amalek, not the children of Amalek? Because it's not about his descendants. Amalek, you need to understand, is the king who attacks the ancient Hebrews from behind, where the women, the children, the weak, and the sick, and the old are. And so he's a perpetrator. And he consciously attacks that because that's the weakest point of the ancient Hebrews' camp as they're traveling. And so what God is saying, and this is what our sages all agree on, is that the text is saying that we should always be at war with the perpetrator, within and without. Rabbi Elijah Shulchat wrote an amazing book called The Amalek, the Enemy Within. What's Amalek within? If someone has an addiction, that addiction is Amalek. Okay, it's preying on the weakest part of the person. You don't give an alcoholic one drink. You cut it out, you destroy it. You don't give cancer a little bit of room, you destroy it. Now, how do we know if a human being is Amalek? Because just like Amalek, they consciously go out to destroy the children, the women, the sick, the weak,
and the old. Yeah.
And the reality is we are commanded to destroy it utterly and completely. We have an obligation. I just wrote a column on it today that was out. We have an obligation to kill every member of Hamas and to salt the earth with their ashes. And that is, for me, horrific. And it's what we need to do.
Right.
And there's another piece in it. There's a midrash, a teaching 2,000 years old over that when the soldiers of Pharaoh are being drowned in the Sea of Reeds, and they're all drowning, the angels start to sing, and God, through his tears, stops them and says, the work of my hands is being destroyed, and you want to sing hymns of praise? There's no joy in this. And innocent lives will die with them, but the simple commandment, the simple obligation we have, a spiritual obligation, as you say, this isn't just about Israel and Hamas. This is good and evil. And we need to make it into a parking lot with no underground structures, and we need to mourn them, and we need to say prayers for their souls when they're dead, because none of those Hamas soldiers who are doing these horrific things, they weren't born like that. Their souls, when they were born, were good, like all babies, and they were immediately trained from the time they're toddlers to slaughter animals.
Yeah.
And we need to mourn that they surrendered their souls. And at the same time, we need to destroy every one of these human beings. And that's so painful. And it's why Golda Meir again said a great line. She said, when there comes, God willing, a time for peace, we may be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our children, but we will never be able to forgive them for making us kill theirs. These Hamas are hiding and holding babies in their arms as shields. There's video of them sending their children, their 3 and 4 year old kids, go throw stones at the Israeli soldiers.
Yeah.
They've lost any sense of human souls or humanity. It's past barbarian.
Yeah.
Even animals don't treat other animals this way.
Boy, those are tough words to hear, Rick. What do you think of what the rabbi just said? Because he took a lot of fire for saying something similar to that on the Candace Owens show this week.
Honestly, I want some time to digest that.
Yeah. It's reality of war. And war is never pretty. There are always civilians who are going to die. There are always innocents that are going to die in war. There's really no way to totally prevent it.
This is such a difficult subject. I see people so entrenched in their views. Just look in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
I understand the deeper issues surrounding the children dying. I understand the ideology, I think, to some degree, at play, the religion even, where these children are being used as human shields. I understand the what I'm struggling with is the idea that you have to kill every single one. That, to me, I struggle with that because I want peace.
Me too.
I would like people to learn to live together. I would like to think that a solution can be found to these problems without one side or the other completely wiping the other side out. Even if it is just Hamas, not all Palestinians, but the idea that you have to eliminate every single one of them, I find that very, very difficult to deal with. Because to me, I find the other side just as extreme. You need to eliminate Israel, wipe it off the face of the planet, from the river to the sea. I
find that equally abhorrent.
Yeah, I can't reconcile either one of those positions. I think that there has to be a solution without going to those extremes. But I understand what he's saying. I understand his perspective on it. I also, like to think that I understand to some degree where the people on the other side are coming from as well. But that's my background as a journalist too, right? I've always been trained to try to see all sides of a story and understand, which is why I'm not Mr. Popular, because
picking a side.
I'm not trying not to pick a real side in this.
Yeah.
I'd just like to try to find a solution.
Well, what we were just talking about is how our politicians are waffling on this. They picked a side and then they kind of switch into the other side. They're got their finger in the air to see which way the wind is blowing. And we see that with President Biden. We see a lot of pro-Israel Democrats. Democrats in the United States have always traditionally, Jews in the United States traditionally vote Democrat by a large margin.
Oh, yes.
They feel betrayed, backstabbed by President Biden, by this administration. And now it's an election year. They're looking for a place to go. And some of them will probably hold their nose and go vote for President Trump, even though they really don't want to. I think a lot of American Democrat Jews just do not like Donald Trump, but they feel like Trump is the only guy who offers the alternative, who will stand with Israel. But I'd like to point out that there is another option. There is an old school Democrat who's now running as a independent in this year's race. You do have a third option, who stands firmly and resolutely with Israel, and that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And as we well know, we've talked about it on this show ad infinitum, that he gets attacked every time he opens his mouth about this war. Anytime he reiterates his support for Israel, as the Kennedy family always did. His father, of course, gave his life for Israel. He was killed by a Palestinian terrorist in 1968 on the campaign trail. And his uncle, John F. Kennedy, started our special relationship with Israel. He was the first American president to actually sell arms to Israel when Truman and Eisenhower were prickly. They didn't want to do that. So this week, RFK Jr. gave an interview to Reuters. And they asked him about the Israel-Palestine conflict, of course, and the war in Gaza. His comments pretty much echoed exactly what we just heard the rabbi say. He said that Hamas is evil and must be destroyed.
In an interview with Reuters at his home in Los Angeles, independent U.S. presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. offered staunch support for Israel, calling it a, quote, moral nation that was justified in responding to the Hamas militant group in Gaza.
The world community has isolated Israel and said, you're on your own. And I think as long as Israel is in that position, its only choice is to destroy Hamas.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.